All right, welcome everybody to another One Comics pairing show. I know you're all going to be creeping in here in the next couple of minutes. So let's, you know what, we don't have, I've been so used to having announcements at the beginning, but we actually don't have any announcements, right? We were just running a Kickstarter like the last month and a half. And like, so we always had all these announcements at the beginning, but no announcements, but we do have a very special guest. Oh, and there's everyone. They're starting to show up. Wonderful. Welcome everybody. Sound off in the comments. Let me know you are here. And we have a very special guest today, Mark Romero of Attic Door Media, and the writer and would you call yourself a co-creator of Incident Report? Or are you
co-creator? Yeah.
You are a co-creator of Incident
Yeah.
Report as well, along with Mary Puppo and Brian Pippin, if I'm getting everyone's names correct there.
Sippin actually.
Sippin.
Yeah, Sippin.
I'm thinking Lord of the Rings. Sorry, going back to the Pippin. But Mark, welcome to the Wine and Comics pairing show. We're gonna play our little snazzy opening, and then we're gonna get launched right into it. Oh, that's not it. It's been a little while. Okay, here we go. All right. And just so everyone knows, I am flying solo today, so no Dallas. He had I don't want to call it a work emergency, but just work was not letting him go to come do this show tonight. So it's just going to be me and Mark, but we have a shit ton to talk about. So let's get started. So Mark, first of all, welcome. And second of all, I just wanted to say, and Dallas wanted to send this along as well, this is kind of an amazing comic. It tickled us. I mean, like tickle isn't the right word. It just checked boxes. It checked so many bloody boxes. And one of the things, actually, before we get started on the comic specific, talk to us a little bit, I keep saying us, talk to me a little bit about Attic Door Media. And I know you guys, you were tabletop gamers. I'm assuming they kept calling you the game master. So were you usually the one leading the charge and telling the story and sort of chronicling that, and they were the players? Or how did you guys meet in the first place? And I know that was sort of the gateway that led to you founding the ADM and starting comics.
Yes. So in our group, I'm typically the game master, but over the last couple of years, we've all kind of everyone's experimented with it, which is good.
Yeah.
And I think me and Mary have known each other for a long time. I actually met Mary my freshman year of high school.
Oh, wow.
And then
Okay.
we both met Sippin sometime in college. We call Brian Sippin. We just go by last names for him.
Okay. I'll remember to do the same.
Yeah, we met basically, and we've always been gamers. Me and Mary had been playing D&D since like high school, and like this was back when we didn't have cars and our parents didn't really want to take us places, so like we didn't even have like dice when we played D&D. Like we tore up strips of paper in a cup, and that's how we rolled. We used paper in a
and
cup,
just hold them out. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, not a very good system, because you knew which pieces of paper were the high numbers just by feeling around for a few little time. And so the game we played in college, it was a Champions game, which was run by another friend of ours at the time. Mary and Sippin were a part of it for a long time, and that's kind of where Anne came from. Sippin played a character that isn't on screen yet in the books, and then I actually played Kenji, and so that's kind of where the characters came from. And after college, we decided like we wanted to like explore the characters more, and we started talking together about like things we might want to do with like a superhero style setting. And so we kind of started generating the world of Incident Report beyond that, but the characters came first, kind of.
Gotcha. Yeah. And we have Mary in the chat. It's been a long time. Yes, from high school. That is epic. And John, thank you, John. Welcome. Rock on. So out of curiosity, what was the system when you started using these characters in specific? What was the system you were playing with?
It's called the Hero System. It's a really crunchy system if you've ever played, or if anyone's familiar.
It's
there's
been
a
a long
lot of
time
things.
for me, but yes, I have experience. Yes.
Yeah. What's cool about the system is that like you literally can do anything, which was really great for Sipton, especially who just likes to think up like wild powers.
Okay.
And like if there's a thought in your head, there's probably some way to make it in the hero system.
Right. Yes. I have a best friend from college. He's still on the East Coast, and I've moved out to the West Coast, but we still like Zoom every other week and stuff like that just to stay in touch. And he was the gamer. Like he had, I think to this day I follow him on Kickstarter, and so like I do all the comics, he does all the games, and it's just sort of I see him pledge like for like a half dozen things every single week, and he's like he collects systems, he collects like every stray game, every wild idea, and even when we were in college, the hero system was one that I think we mostly just created characters.
Hmm.
We rarely actually played it. It was just a what wild characters can we create and what does it look like when you fill out that character sheet and put those numbers in place and whatnot. But yeah, first, if you're a superhero head, and that we bonded over comics first, and then he got me into games more than I had been previously, and because that was a superhero comic booky
Hmm.
system, I think that was my gateway to getting more into that and appreciating that. But
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
It's definitely an intimidating system to play, I will say.
Yes. I
It's
don't think I ever
complicated.
fully understood it. I will say that. He led me by the nose through most of it?
Surprisingly, Mary, I think, is the one in our group that understands it the best. Um, and she ran a game in the incident report setting for just like our little group I think it was like a year or two ago now. And that was a lot of fun, kind of like testing the waters there and actually getting to use the characters in the game system that we originally kind of created them for, but
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
setting.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And for yourself as a writer, what's your background outside of like obviously the gaming and whatnot? For yourself, like what had you done leading into getting started with the three of you creating stories together, or was the three of you creating stories together kind of the first official thing that you were going to put out into the public type of a shtick?
I think for me, like my writing background is really like just based on tabletop and like I
Hmm.
mentioned, like I'm typically the game master for a group, so it's a lot of collaborative storytelling. So like we've told stories together as a group for a long time, and when we started talking about like what we wanted incident report to be and we inevitably fell upon like doing it as a comic, we just kind of continued through the path that we were on basically.
Right.
And that story background basically is kind of how we got started or why we thought that we could try to do this at all. um, you know
Well, I mean, oh, sure, wow. So I mean, good effing job, because this does not feel like a first work by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm sure to some degree, like all the stories you tell with doing something like tabletop, technically, like you've been cutting your teeth, you've been practicing, you've been deciding what you like, what you don't. But this is such a well crafted and nuanced and complicated. Like it's got layers to it. It's got characters that are all somewhat like on the surface they're characters we recognize, and so like there's an easy end to the story.
Mhm.
But then what you're building here, I can one of the things that I liked is I was reading the story of Adictor Media, and you were talking of the story behind the group and yourselves as individual as creators. You were talking about how you weren't seeing the stories you wanted to see, in
Mhm.
other media and other comics. Um, I have things I want to say about that, but first, like, what were those stories? Like, if you had to put it into words as best you could, obviously you put it into stories. Like, this is what we want to see, and you put it out there. But if you could somehow, like, what were you not seeing? What would you say you're doing with this story and the other Adictor Media comics that are now out there that you weren't seeing elsewhere?
I think there were. I think this has shifted a little bit over time. And I think originally there was some frustration with kind of like the resetting of like things in comic books, the DC reboots happening over and over again,
Right,
the kind of like revolving door of characters like dying and then coming back somehow was really frustrating for us.
right,
Um, but I think that's shifted, at least for me, it's shifted a little bit because I think like because maybe like during COVID time, and we had published the first issue, I think, a year before COVID, I think like
Right.
after COVID and like just like the advent of like big shows like Game of Thrones and stuff, it kind of became like we wanted to focus on like a more positive take on like the superhero genre because there was a feeling that like things had gotten kind of negative, and a
Right.
lot of the stories around like things like the
Isn't
Mutant
like dark,
Registry.
like kind of Dark Knight Rises type of a thing? Like it was just getting too dark, depressing, violent, that type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I had described it once as like we wanted to take like superheroes, but give it more of like a Star Trek vibe in the sense that like we wanted the
Mm,
world to have
yeah.
like an overall positive and like optimistic
Right.
outlook rather than like a
Right.
really pessimistic and dark outlook.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that, especially with this. So let's introduce actually, so I can start commenting on the comic a little bit more because I keep holding myself back from being able to say specific things. So, folks, incident report, which by the way, I should pop on here. Let me put the banner up on screen and let me get a link in the chat for everyone who is watching. So you have a link where you can go to the Kickstarter. It is incident report number 3. All issues 1 through 3 are available on this campaign. We'll go take a look at the campaign page in just a bit. But this is a story about superpowers have happened in the world. People are, um, from what I can tell, it seems to be like it's happening. It's not quite X-Men where like it happens at puberty. Like that was always the trigger for X-Men, where it's like you had to hit that age point and then the powers came into being. And here we have it like they can kind of drop at any time, which is really interesting. Where it's like genetically, yes, you're likely, certain people are more likely than others to get these powers, but then kids like infants are getting powers. Sometimes they're 4 to 6 years old. Sometimes they're a little bit older. There doesn't seem to be a moment where that happens, but as you can see here, let me put a little image. This is the cover to Incident Report number 1. This is the ICF, if I'm getting that acronym correct.
ICA, the International
ICA,
Chimeran Administration.
correct. And chimeras are what they call the superpowered folks in this world, are the
Yeah.
chimeras. And there's, of course, a government organization. As much as it was a divisive, almost what's the word I'm looking for, controversial thing in Marvel when they had the whole Civil War story, and it was like a registration, and it's like, right, in real life that is the first thing that would happen, is like superpowered individuals would 100% be registered. You'd know who they were. I mean, obviously some might not be, but you're supposed to be. So in this world, they are. The Chimera organization keeps track of them, but they're both a police side to that and a social worker side to that, where it's like helping people understand, like parents who aren't superpowered, taking care of their kids who are superpowered, or even if they're both superpowered, they're different. It's not a linear. I have flame powers, you get flame powers, right? It's like the powers sort of, you don't know what the next generation is going to get, so you have to learn, how do I raise someone? Once you figure out what the power is, what do you do with it? Like, how do you raise that? How do you not let them die? How do you not let them kill you, unintentionally? There's so much to do. So the lady you see on this cover, she, when at the start of the comic, she is ex of the government enforcement side of things, and she's on the social worker side of things. She's being pulled back to into the investigative side, and the police. I'm probably going to forget if there is an official term. One is, are there official terms between the two units?
So the law enforcement division is just the law enforcement division, and she's in the social work division. So there is a third
Okay.
division that we haven't experienced, which is the research division, which
Ooh,
researches
okay.
how chimerans get their powers.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. So, and I've only read the first 2 issues. Issue 3 is the one that's on this that is being funded in this current Kickstarter. So there is, we have not, we don't know a lot about the chimeras yet, though we have gotten enough to really be like absorbed into this comic. But the thing that I loved about this is, and I'm going to show you, this is the cover for issue number 2. So here you go. You can see a parent trying to, like, looking on at a child who does have superpowers. And then this is issue number 3 that is coming up right now, where there is going to be a lot of additional characters being introduced from the look of the cover that we're all going to be following. So this is one of the things that really impressed me of this comic, is you have obviously superpowers, and you just mentioned Star Trek, right? And you wanted to kind of get that sort of hopeful, there's a future where all like it's hard, it's difficult, there's a lot to do, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be misunderstandings, there will be bad faith actors, but we're all in it together to get to that hopeful future. And one of the things that I love about Incident Report, it's a very grounded kind of superhero story. It has its feet planted in like, how would this really work if these people existed in the real world? And, you know, it's not trying to be like a term paper on how it would work in the real world or anything like that. But you're, I love that the writing in this comic, from both from a plot perspective, but mostly from a character and dialogue perspective, like everyone is doing their best in this world that they're sort of they find themselves in, and they're all everything, every action, every decision like has a personal and nuanced element to it, which is something that I think comics are often so in a rush to get to the action scenes, to get to the big moments that are going to keep you there, that you kind of have those scenes of character, quote unquote character building and quote unquote world building, but it's like they're to the point. They're like, get it to the point, don't waste too much time on it, get to the next big event, get to the next big moment that's going to just blow people's minds. And you guys are really taking your time with this. Was that something one thing I want to ask you, is that something that, like, do you feel like that was intentional? Was that one of the things you wanted to bring?
It was intentional, and it was something that I was absolutely just like terrified about. And I really felt, especially during issue 2, where there's not an big action scene, that I was really, really worried about, like, is this going to work without like a lot of like fighting and combat and stuff? And is there a way
Right.
to make it function just kind of with this slow pace? But I think we've benefited a lot. One, because this is our kind of first comic, and two, we've worked with Claire Napier, and she's been a really great
Right.
force for us as our editor, and kind of like keeping us on track and being like,
Right.
yes, this is okay. Don't worry
Right.
about it. Keep going. And she's
Right.
helped us a lot in terms of like making sure that like everything is like tidied up and knit together, and like character beats are really strong. But
Right.
yeah, it was intentional to go slow. It was something that we were worried about. And I think that like going slow in the beginning has allowed us to like flesh out the characters a little bit more,
Yes.
and going into the last half of the arc, things are going to start speeding up rapidly, which
Okay.
should be a lot of fun.
Are we at like a 4-issue arc? Is that what we're looking at for this first one, or
We're doing a full like 6 issue arc.
6 issue?
So
Okay.
yeah, and then I think like issue 1 is really like it follows Anne a lot. Issue 2 goes a little bit into Kenji, and issue 3 is
Right.
goes really deep into Kenji's backstory as well.
Okay.
Then issue 4 is going to be more about Vlad, and then we're going to kind of finish the arc with the fifth and the sixth books, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, one of the things I also noticed about this series is you guys have definitely taken your time on the first 3 issues in terms of getting them out. Was that part of, were you just taking your time on crafting them, or like what was that journey for you in terms of, like, obviously you had your first one that was 2019, right, for issue number one?
Yeah, yeah, that was 2019. I think really COVID just threw a wrench. We had like
Okay.
we were all in
That's right.
South
You guys were
Florida.
all in the you guys were getting together and actually doing this, right? So yeah.
Once a week we would sit down, we would plan everything out, work on issues, do all like the kind of the side marketing stuff for the company and things
Right.
like that. And then COVID happened, and like we went remote, and it just didn't work out, and we were just kind of a
Uh,
mess. Then like we all started to move away, so like we all started in
right.
South Florida. Now only one of us is in South Florida, so it's been
Gotcha.
kind of a crazy few years, which has slowed down the production and things like that. But I'm hoping that
Right, right, right.
now we're back on the roll again, and like we
Okay.
are hopefully going to be moving a little bit faster for the next few issues.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that is funny because I'm so used to comic creative teams never being in the same place. And so you just sort of assume that it's like, well, it's not that. Like, of course, they're always the artist is often in another country, let alone somewhere else in the state. But yeah, that's right. You guys were, oh man, to actually get used to working in the same room. I've certainly never had that experience creatively. It's always been someone on the other side, or someone that I'm like, it's all emails, it's all messaging and zooming and whatnot. But I'm glad that you are adjusting to that and
Yeah.
coming around to been there. Yeah, yeah.
I do miss it. I miss the being able to kind of like sit down at a table, have like a whiteboard up, and just like be able to kind of go crazy. It's a little
God,
bit
yes.
harder to do it virtually, but we've slowly figured it out.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say it would probably be the opposite for me, because I'm used to doing it this way. That if someone put me on the spot and was in the room with me, I'd just be like, now, like right now, shit." Um, but on that point, like when we started this show, me and Dallas, we both lived in LA, and we had a number of shows where we were in the same room together, and just then brought a guest in with us in the same room, like it was another person in LA. And we didn't
Mhm.
start live streaming until he went to the East Coast. He's been there for over a year now, and he's going to come back eventually. We just don't know when. But he's been stuck over there, and we just had to change our plans completely and be like, okay, the whole format of the show needs to live streaming, and let's just have Zoom guests on. We'll get StreamYard, and we'll start doing it this way. But yeah, rewiring your brain for that and figuring out how that's going to work. It's a completely different ball game. It always is. Um,
Yeah, 100%.
yeah, I'm glad you guys are still going though, because this is, oh, and we do have Mary is like, I do miss the whiteboards. And yeah, I think have you guys and I'm assuming you might do something like this, maybe you don't, but I've worked at jobs. I've had like yeah, ever since the pandemic, we've all had fully remote jobs, right? Where
Mhm.
we've just been working in the office, and Monday.com has this sort of whiteboard type thing. I'm sure it's not the only thing out there, but it's like it is that everyone is working on it at the same time. You're all zooming on Zoom, and then everyone is accessing the whiteboard. You guys still do that, or are you still like kind of sort of whiteboarding it in that way?
Not as much as we should, I feel like, but we
No.
when
Okay.
we do it, we use something called Miro, which is really fun
Okay.
whiteboarding software, and then we actually use something called ClickUp as well, to
Okay.
just help keep ourselves organized, from far away. We actually like had a this is goes again to like how much we had like we're in the same space, we're going to use the same space. We
Right.
had like a room in my old house that was basically like the attic door media room, and we had like physical like metal boards that had like a Kanban chart that like these are the things we need to do and this is the stuff that
Right.
we're working on. And so all of that had to become virtual basically, and we took a while to do that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So coming back to the story of this of incident report, what were you hoping to? I guess you have superpowers. Did you tabletop these you did games with these characters. Was this story that you're trying to tell here, was it birthed originally from a game, or what is this story something that was crafted like one only after you decided to get serious about making a comic?
Only after we decided to get serious about making the comic. The original game was actually in the Marvel universe.
Oh,
And
okay.
so the characters were X-Men basically,
Of course.
and that's
Of
what we
course.
did. So Anne was an X-Men, and so was Sipin's character. Kenji was actually a Spider-Man villain at the time. He was a part of the Sinister Seven. We added
Okay.
one for him,
Okay.
and that's where the
I can
characters
see
came
that.
from originally. But yeah, we definitely crafted it after the fact when we decided that we want to kind of revisit it and kind of figure out like, okay, what do we want to do with the characters? We need to make a
Right.
story, a setting around them. What are we gonna do?
All right.
And
Yeah,
a
yeah.
a lot of the personalities I think still come through. Some of them have changed somewhat dramatically, like
Naturally.
from process, but for the most part,
Right.
they come through.
Perfect. And for yourself, and if you can answer for the others, feel free. I just don't know if you can, but greatest influences in terms of writing and comics, specifically for comics, like you've already met drop Star Trek. So plainly that is like an influence on this one. But for you personally as a writer, like who are the ones who like really were there other writers that gave you the bug to really want to do this, or did the bug only come once you had the idea, then you found out you liked it, and now you're embedded?
No, my biggest probably like writing influence and is Brandon Sanderson.
Okay, yeah.
really love almost everything that he's written. And what I love about what he's writes is that he has a way of writing like magic into his world that just like makes sense. The magic has its own set of
Right.
rules that it follows, and he has a good way of kind of like building the worlds around the magic system and building like this culture around the magic. And
Right.
so that was kind of the goal as well, to take like this idea of superpowers and build like
Right.
a new culture for the world around superpowers and how it would
Right.
react to it. Um, I don't know if about Mary, but since she's in the chat, she might be able to throw something up on the
Yeah,
board.
Mary, if you can throw it in the chat, what your greatest influences are as a writer. And for you, but going off that, Mark, what you just said about building that world. So when you created the idea for Incident Report, what was like you're starting from superpowers exist and you build it out from there. Um, did the story itself come only after you had built out like how this world was going to work, and then you decided like what the story was like, what you were going to do with these characters and who the characters were? Was the world building kind of the first step for you? I think that makes sense probably as a gamer, because that is usually the way, right?
Yeah, the world building was definitely the first step, I would say. There were a couple of character beats that we had wanted to hit initially, but I think we've kind of thrown that to the wayside a little bit in
Okay.
favor of just letting the world breathe a little bit.
Right.
Um, and yeah, we spent a lot of time like working on how the world was going to function. But we started from the standpoint, okay, we have superpowers. We want the system to work. So what does a functioning system of government look like around superpowers? What are the necessities to like make it so that like people just aren't like killing each other in the streets, and like what
Right.
needs to happen?
Right.
And that's why, we really focused on Anne, because her being a social worker is a good introduction to how the world works, because
Right.
she's a pyrokinetic, which she could do
Right.
a lot of damage when she wants to.
Right.
But like her actual job is just like helping teach parents how
Right.
to work with their children.
Right.
And we thought that was a good way to, lead people into the series.
100%. I think if you had started with just a cop, essentially, then it just becomes a cops and robbers thing, like, a
Yeah.
crime comic type of a thing. And I mean, it'd be, that'd be great. But at the same time, it's not, this is a more interesting entry point. And I will say, like, starting in issue number 2, when you start to see the home life of these characters, right? And so you get a much more in depth look at like how that functions, because that was something where even just her helping other families at the beginning of issue number 1, you get a peek into that. But then we get on to sort of like, okay, here's sort of the core first storyline that we're going to be focusing on. But then in issue 2, we still go back and we just get introduced to her home life, which was far more um robust than I thought her home life. Like the fact that she had that full family, and I was like, whoa, shit, okay. I didn't realize we were going here. But I love it because I think like right, even though it was only issue 2, like we were then expanding on that as much as we were expanding on the whole law enforcement criminal, element of this world and whatnot.
Yeah, we wanted to really focus in on her family life, and we're going to be doing the same for Kenji and for Vlad. And it's just such an important part of like everybody's daily life. Your family is, you spend most of your life with them. And we
Right.
wanted it to be kind of a core part of the story, because especially for Anne, who she's a mother, but she's also a big sister, in the sense that like she's taking care of her teenage sister basically, because their parents are out of the picture at the moment.
Right.
So we wanted to kind of focus on that, because how she works with other families is really effective and kind of mirrored by how her own home life is.
Right.
And also, if a character has a family, there's places where you can insert like problems.
Right, 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 right. Percent. And we've got Mary Gail Simone. She always has a way of finding hope to bring out the humanity in super settings. I'll tag along on Sanderson just because of the way he shaped the way we've approached abilities. Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, Gail Simone's amazing. I agree with that completely. Kelly Thompson too. If you've read any Kelly Thompson, Mary, look her up. She did a Black Cloak at Image. which is I thought was one of the best comics of 2023. So take a look into that. And she just did the Cull, Cull, at Image as well. And she does this. She does. Is she Birds of Prey now too? I think she is the current Birds of Prey writer. So kind of walking in the shoes of Gail Simone there, and kind of picking up that torch, picking up that banner. And lastly, this amazing. Don't know how to describe this. It's Jeff at Marvel. It's called It's Jeff, and it's a sort of it's a shark, the little small baby cartoon shark that interacts with all the Marvel Comics characters in these like funny comic strips, like a Hagar the Horrible, Popeye type of a thing, where it's just little one-page things. All of those from Kelly Thompson. Go look those up because they are. Oh, there it is. Yes, love Kelly Thompson. Loving her run on Birds of Prey too. Awesome. All right. Oh, I'm also obsessed with Jeff. Best little land shark around. Amazing. So, favorite comics of you at this point, Mark? Were you a comic guy before trying this? And if you weren't, have you gotten into any since?
I wasn't a big comic guy beforehand, but I was always into like the like Spider-Man and X-Men. I had those big like black and white omnibuses, and I
Mm-hmm.
had them for Spider-Man and X-Men, and I read them all the whole way through. But I was never one to pick up like the floppies in the comic book store. I
Right.
was primarily a manga reader actually, so like I read a lot of
You are probably wealthier than the rest of us because of that. So it's
Oh,
all that's for the best.
it was actually more sitting in a bookstore until they kicked us out, sitting on the floor in like high school reading through the mangas until they
Right.
won't let you anymore.
Right.
um, but yeah, I was primarily a manga reader. Um, and nowadays, I feel like I still don't read a ton of floppies, but I do read a lot of like indies, just like reading other creators like books and things like that, and just kind of trying to keep up. I'm trying to think of the last like series I read most recently. I read what was I reading? I think the last thing I read was Copperhead is the thing, and I just read
Copperhead.
Wicked and
Oh.
Divine. Copperhead was
Ooh,
a short
yeah.
series run. Wicked Divine probably a lot more familiar. I think that was more popular.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was Copperhead was Image as well, right? If I'm remembering
I think it
correctly.
was Image. Let me
Shiny
check.
Google search.
Yeah, let me see. Copperhead was Image. Yes, it's like
Okay,
a
perfect.
space
Yeah.
western.
Yeah, I'm it's ringing vague bells. I definitely have not read it, but I mean, just trying to read every Image comic that comes out would break anyone's bank. So it's like that's not happening. But
Yeah,
which is part of the joy. I feel like we're in this era of comics between the Kickstarter side of thing, the crowdfunding side of indie, then even the direct market side of indie has exploded to the point of like no one can keep up. Like, let alone I have not read a Marvel or DC book. As much as I love Kelly Thompson, I'm still probably never going to read Birds of Prey just because I left that behind like back in 2008. I
hmm,
sort of made an executive decision where I'm like, there's not enough time in the world. There's too many other things I'm interested in reading, and I'm not made of money. So it's like, I think I'm moving towards, and I love the indie side more than Marvel DC by that point in my life. I'd grown not entire. I mean, I still enjoyed Marvel DC, but I think I was getting into I was becoming that person who crabs about it more than I had more complaints about what Marvel and DC was doing than I was actually enjoying them anymore. And
yeah,
I was sort of like, okay, truth talk to myself. Do I really want to be reading these anymore and just be bitter about them, or should I just move on and admit that like these are not bringing me the joy that they used to, which is perfectly good. They did at one point. I still can go back and revisit those series. It's like music you listen to when you're a teenager. It imprints itself on your brain, and forever those will be amazing no matter what happens. Even if objectively you might be like, I don't think I'd recommend this album to anybody, but to me, it's amazing, and I'm gonna listen to it
yeah.
for the rest of my life. Yeah.
I think one of the problems with a lot of, at least for me, when I try to delve into Marvel, and DC a lot is that like I have this old image of like this old Essentials books that I read, and so like the
Oh yeah.
characters are a certain way, right? And so
Hmm.
like whenever I read it, like that's not Spider-Man. Spider-Man wouldn't do that. Like, and I'm thinking of like
Right.
Stanley's like original like books, and like it's changed a lot, obviously.
Of
But I
course.
like the I like experiencing like, new characters and like getting introduced to new worlds and things like that because that's
Right.
I love like world building. I love to see what people do with world
Yes.
building. So like I want
Same.
to
Yeah.
experience more of that basically.
Right. Right. And there's nothing more disappointing than world building that comes across as generic, right? It's like you've seen that world building before, and it's just someone else's very minor spin on the same world building that has come again and again and again. And I think there is so much pleasure to be derived when you stumble across something that is like someone's building a world, and it's like every page, you have no idea what's coming next.
Yeah.
Because even though something like Incident Report, it's superheroes. So you're like, right, I get superheroes, I get superpowers. From there, and we've even had some grounded superpowers. I mentioned on social media earlier, I kind of compared it to two things. One, the Brubaker sleeper, right? You've got sort of that criminal element
Mhm.
that's a piece of Incident Report's world. Where it's like superpowers, but very gritty and grounded and kind of sort of real worldish. And Rising Stars, I'm not even that big of a fan of Rising Stars, but I'm like, this is like a better version to me of of what Rising Stars was trying to do. Rising Stars was a little too in love, I think, with like Marvel and DC, and like trying to do too much of the like Kingdom Come kind of a thing, right? Where
Mhm.
it's like it's still big and godlike and huge and massive. And I like how Incident Report really is about the day to day. Even though the stories are weaving something a little bit more, you're following it with these characters. Just they're very street level. They're and very like them personally. They go to work. They go home. They've got shit happening at home. They've got stresses there. They've got stresses at work. And the relationships and stresses are very personal. It's not all about this is how superpowers change, like in the like there's not, and there might, this might be coming, so that's fine, but like a superpowered event that just like changes everything, or at least that's not what it is issue to issue. Like you certainly didn't lead with that. We're already going to be 3 issues in, and it seems still like it's going to stick to these are important to the characters involved, but where the rest of it, like that's kind of how the world really works, and I really like that. You don't see that very often with superpowered anything.
One of the reasons why we also wanted to do it this way is because we wanted to kind of like make the setting uh, understandable in a way that anyone could kind of write in it a little bit. So
Okay, yeah,
on
yeah.
our second Kickstarter and in our first as well, we did like short stories where we like found writers who just wanted to write a story inside of the universe. And
Okay.
we want to do a lot more of that. And I would hope that we get to a point where we can just like work with a bunch of different comic writers and artists who just want to tell like small stories within the universe and kind of just like have their own take of things and
Right.
how they would kind of organize this world a little bit and kind of have it all be a part of the canon overall.
Right. Were those short stories, that wasn't the back matter of issue 1 that came, because that seemed like stuff you guys officially wrote to be a
Yeah.
part of the main world. Okay, these were like a bonus set, like stretch goal extras or something during the first issue campaign, or
Yeah, these were stretch goals on both the first issue and the second issue campaign. They're a variety of stories. One of them was written by us, but the others were all written by, friends of ours or other people
right.
in the comics industry or indie comic scene. I think Mike Connell wrote one called Hungry Harry about a
Mm.
guy that can eat anything. And it's
Ah,
kind of a
gotcha.
darker story. There's one that's written about our friend Ashley wrote. It is about a girl who gets her powers late. She is a speedster,
Yeah.
and basically, like she's on the high school track team, and then she gets her powers. So since she's a speedster and a chimera, she can't be on the track team anymore.
Right.
But she's also a very bad speedster, so she's kind of this mode where like she is can't be on either track team.
Right.
And
Right.
it's kind of
Because she's
about how
not
she
she's not
handles that.
used to having the powers, right? So that makes it
Not fast enough to be a speedster on the track team, but too fast to
Too
be with
fast to be a
everybody
normal
else.
person. Right, right,
Yeah.
right. That's funny. Yeah, and on the Hungry Harry part too, it's funny that you said it was a very dark story because that sounds like a spin on the DC Matter eating lad from the Legion of Superheroes. And honestly, as a kid, that character scared the shit out of me. Like he was the one that was eerie. Like there was something about him. Like it was never portrayed as dark or scary or anything like that. But there was always something like when you saw him just like
Eating anything.
disintegrate something, right? And you were just sort of like, Jesus. Like I was just like, no, 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 no. This is not okay. This is not a superhero. I'm not okay with this.
I
So
have a
yeah.
big love for like fridge horror like that. It's a lot of fun.
Yes, Matter Eater Lad, 100%. Sippins Inspo for Hungry Harry. And we also have Daystart had a deep one about the ethics of counseling when you have abilities as well. Ah,
Yes, the therapist is an empath, and so she goes through in her head whether it's good to use her powers when she's working with a client, basically.
right, right. Nope, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, on that note, let's actually. So I was just about to ask if those short stories were a part or available as add-ons or anything in this current campaign.
They are in the. I believe if you get to the physical tier, you get
Let's
them,
actually
or
let's
the
let's
top.
share. Yeah, yeah. Let's go to the campaign. Let's go share the screen and let's look through it, and then we will get our proper answer here. So
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen. We're going to bring up the incident reports. There we are. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So, guys, as you can see, they have only just begun. They still have 25 days to go, 80 backers, almost about 2/3 of the way there. Where's that 2/3? That is pretty close to 2/3. Almost there. Almost there. So we are and $3,500 goal. So they are getting there. That's actually a really good start, especially this time of year. It's been a sleepy late winter, early spring so far on Kickstarter for a lot of folks. So it's been a little more pulling teeth than I think it's been in the past, or so a lot of folks have been reporting. But that's a very good start. All right, so incident report takes place in a world where superpowers are a mundane part of life. Work 9 to 5. Some fly to the office, but most take the subway. And yes, Chimerans, that is what we call our superheroes. Here is the main cover of issue number 3. And let's see if we can go down. So I know for issue number 3, oh, this is actually, okay, here's a question I have for you as well. Because having read issues 1 and 2, and I don't know if this is all 3 of you or if this is you specifically, Mark, since you are the credited kind of script writer of the 2 issues. One thing that was really curious to me, I kind of liked it, but it took me by surprise both times in issues 1 and 2, is the final page / panel of the 2 issues, which is that it just sort of like neither of them are cliffhangers, but they're both sort of like you're sort of in the middle of the conversation. Like people are saying something, they say something, the conversation sort of ends, maybe doesn't. You flip the page, the issue's over, and I'm like, oh shit, that was it. And I definitely wanted more in both cases, but I thought it was very curious. Most people are very want to make sure they're ending on like a cliffhanger or ending on something like some sort of like zinger where this is going to really make you come back. And in both issues, you were very careful, it seemed, to be like, no, like we've done what we wanted to do with this issue. We're just going to let you off here kind of gently. And then we'll be back. And I don't know if that was on purpose, especially because when you collect all this into a trade paperback later, like I can see these issues, like you won't even need chapter breaks. Like you can easily just let this bleed one page into the other as an OGN, and no one would ever think it was divided any other way. Was that on purpose?
For the first issue, definitely, because we weren't sure if
Okay.
we were going to fund. We weren't sure if we are going to keep
Oh,
doing this
okay.
after the first issue. We'll tell a nice little story. We'll see where it ends, and it'll be fine. And we'll see where we go from there. um,
Gotcha.
the second issue, we wanted to put a tiny bit more of a cliffhanger.
There is a
So
tiny
like,
bit more. This is true.
yeah. And then the third issue is a big cliffhanger, I would say, at the
Okay.
end.
Okay. I think the
Yeah.
second issue is a little bit more, but I know like the thing that really surprised me is there was a scene with Kenji just before that seemed to be like, oh, this is just about to hit a major cliffhanger. And then we went back to other characters who just had a conversation and it ended again. And I'm like, you love doing that. That's really interesting. But yeah,
That's probably
again,
the writer, like the fiction, like Brandon Sanderson, because I feel like
yes,
fiction writers do it a lot, where they end a
right.
chapter and then they go to a completely different character altogether at the end.
Right.
And it's like, oh, what
Right.
happened?
Well, and when chapters end, they are like in novels, to be fair, like they're much less about zinger endings per chapter. They're like, you bought the whole book already. Like, we
Yes.
don't have to worry. Like, if you're not into this story, you're not getting to the next chapter, no matter how we end this chapter. So, we don't have to do that. And it does feel, I suppose, in that way, like kind of literary in that regard, where it's just sort of like, here's a natural end to this scene. And okay, next issue, whenever that hits.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was very curious because I'm so my brain is very wired for comics where there's always that like as massive of a zinger as people can come up with and concoct with wherever they are.
A big
And you
flashy
seem to be
spread
like
on the page, right? Like,
right, exactly, or just a big WTF moment where you're like, oh my, or OMG moment where you're just like, oh my god, now I have to come back.
yeah.
And you were very good where you're just like, okay, that's all for this issue. That we did what we came here for.
I think it's also like a learning experience for us, since it's the first like foray for us into writing comics. It's like we weren't really sure what to do, so we tried to do what we could to tell the story, and then like poke Claire, like, is it okay to end here? What do we do? And
Right.
you know,
And we do have Mark as A plus at those teaser setups. Yes, yes, yes. I mean, one thing about this, as much as I thought it was very curious about the final page of each issue, like the scene, each issue is building upon itself. Like, I don't mean to say there is not a ton of forward momentum and there isn't a lot being set up to where you are chomping at the bit to know what is going to happen next, especially after issue number 2. There's so much going on at that point, and I can tell that issue number 3 is going to be much more like there's a lot that's going to happen in this one, based on everything that has been set up in the first 2.
yeah.
All right, so we got that standard cover. Ryan Best is the main artist of the series. He's doing this as the main cover. Let's go down. Okay, here's some of his interior art from this issue.
Yeah, so this issue starts a little bit differently from the other issues because we're introducing a completely new set of characters that won't matter
Yes.
too much until issue 4 and 5. But
Okay.
we start off by introducing Sophie here,
Mm.
and she'll be important later. I don't want to. I don't have a way of saying anything without too many spoilers for
Yeah, yeah,
her
yeah.
arc. Um,
Totally. But you can see here the one thing, I've looked at these preview pages before, and you can notice that they're helping, and Sophie is the girl with the skateboard.
yeah,
And you can see that they're helping her kind of get away. She does get away, and we don't really know from these preview pages why she's running, but she is, and she can do something where she can convince someone to, like, she gets in an Uber and the Uber's like, no, 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 you're underage, I can't do this. But then she tells him to do it anyway, and he does it, and then she's gone. So I'm assuming that's where it's going to pick up at a following issue after that,
yeah.
or more in a following issue after that. This is one of our main characters, and this is the husband to one of our main characters. And this is them at their home, at the family home, which was it. All the full family was introduced in issue number 2. And yeah, I mean, Ryan Best also, like, his art is kind of perfect for this because he does the action really well. He does the superpowers and when things start going down amazingly, but then he really does a wonderfully nuanced, let's just sit around and talk for a
Yeah,
couple of pages. And
his
it doesn't feel boring.
expressions.
It doesn't, yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I really love his art. Mary's like always says we picked Ryan Best because he is the best, and he's done a
Yes.
really great job for making the world come to life for us.
Yes. 100%. And especially when there are lots of scenes where it's just like we have a lot that we need to discuss and let's discuss it. And there are, in the film world, there's always that concept of, if you're going to have, like, you can have a talking head scene, like, that's fine in film, but there's sort of the Tarantino method, which is plant the camera, don't move it. and just let the conversation happen. The actors are going to do everything, kind of a thing, you know, and you're just going to let the scene play, and the camera is only going to move at very, very choice moments. But that's on purpose. That's like his style. In most cases, it's kind of like in a live stage play, right? You need some blocking, you need some action, you need something happening in the scene. And it can be as simple as, you know, people eating something. It can be as simple people coming and going, people responding, but there's always like this tiny bit of movement that has to happen, and that makes so much difference. And I love that Ryan finds ways, and I don't know if this is in the script or not, and it could be in the script as well, at which point kudos to you as well. But he finds ways to like keep characters reacting and moving, like they're never perfectly still scenes. And for visual mediums, that's always like, that's a key to selling those, right?
I could tell you that panel right there with Vladimir in the back, kind of like looking up while Anne and Gail are talking, that wasn't in the script. So Ryan definitely put his touch on that one, where he has kind of that
Right there.
expression on his face.
Right. Very
Yeah.
nice. Very, very nice. All right, digital rewards. So all 3 issues obviously available digitally. Ooh, we have ICA Agent desktop wallpapers and audio commentary, which you can get digitally. That's super cool. All right, standard cover physically, obviously. You start to go up there, and let's go down. So the digital is $5 for just digital issue 3, which does come with a digital ICA welcome letter, and then the digital edition. There we go. Digital deluxe, which I'm assuming that's where the wallpaper and the audio commentary and whatnot comes in. That's $7. Digital catch up, of course, is all 3 issues digitally. I'm assuming, does that come?
The catch up tier also comes with the short stories that we talked about earlier.
Oh, beautiful. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you need them digitally, you can get them that way. Is there any print version of those short stories yet? I'm assuming no.
There is actually. We printed it for the
Oh.
last Kickstarter, a short run of it. We didn't offer the print run this time around because surprisingly they were just expensive to print. It was more expensive to print than the comic. So we're like, okay, we only have like 3 of these left. Let's wait on it a little bit.
Okay. Gotcha. And then we have a Shawarma tribute by Alexandra Weisbach.
Yes, we actually started doing our first cons last year, and we actually met Alexandra at the con that we went to in Orlando. Her nice. And Frank Kadar. So they're really great.
Beautiful
people too.
And here's the Frank Kadar. Very nice. All right, and then Sophie first appearance by Paulina Ganuchow.
I'm not sure, and I should know because me and Mary had this conversation 2 days ago where we played a video of her saying her name, and I still don't remember how to say it.
Yep. Whenever if someone's coming on the show and they have a funky name, and I'm like, oh no, my white boy ass is not going to be able to say it. I need to go find a video of them saying it somewhere so I can practice before the show.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's Ganuchow, but I'm probably getting it wrong.
Ganuchow. We'll go with that. Paulina Ganuchow. Paulina, you can leave a comment under this recorded video if you ever watch this, and we're dead wrong, and correct us, please. All right. And that is a very cool cover. And those covers, so we've got the print cover standard. So just the standard cover, guys, $16. And then physical catch-up tier, $25 for all 3 of the main covers physically. And then we start hitting the alternate covers. The Weisbach cover, $30. And the Ganuchow cover, $30 as well. Okay, so I guess pick your poison of alternate covers for $30 each. Beautiful. And all print covers of this issue, I'm assuming, at $55.
Yeah.
Yes. And then if there's going to be an everything that'll come a little bit later. ICA new agent tier. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, let's actually find out what's all in here. You will receive a custom identification card granting you full agent status into the International Chimeran Administration. You'll receive a special congratulations from Assistant Director Carver, an ICA wristband, mission statement brochure, and most importantly, your first case. Damn, that's cool. Okay, that's awesome. Case file number 1 is a choose your own adventure short story from writer V.J. Harris. Free shipping in the US. Amazing. $75. I'm gonna need to consider that. That's really cool. Oh,
Yeah, we
all
had a
right.
lot of fun with this reward and the ones that come after it specifically because, again, going back to like our tabletop routes, we wanted
Yes.
we wanted something interactive. So like we
Yes.
have VJ writing one case file, and we have Friday Strout writing the other one, and the other one is like I don't know if you've seen those like mystery boxes that they sell sometimes at like
Uh-huh.
Target.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to be like a small version of one of those mystery boxes where like you can actually sit down and like be the investigator and solve the case kind of thing.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And so and I can see is that in this seasoned agent tier that you wind up getting the mystery box one?
Yeah, case file 2 I think is in the seasoned agent tier.
Importantly, 2 case files to work with. Yep, there you go. And case file number 2, mystery box. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yep, is a mystery box puzzle from writer Friday Strout. Very, very cool. And then we've got a veteran agent tier. This tier includes all the rewards above, plus a solid metal challenge coin, an award for being one of the administration's most valuable agents. There's a little image of that guy right there. Was that up above? Oh, yeah, there it is. Top Agent Award, challenge coin. Beautiful. All right. Beyond the page, enter the Chimeraverse. Yes. Make your own power character or adventure. So this is where we're getting into the upper tiers. So we got $299. Pick a power. Always wanted to see a specific superpower brought into the limelight. Work with our creative team to have a special superpower spotlighted in one of the next issues of Incident Report. Awesome. Get all the rewards from the ICA Veteran Agent tier. Amazing. That's very cool. I have not seen that before. I really like that you guys are bringing so much of your gaming background and like the things you love about gaming and offering it, because that is something that comic people, even though a lot of comic people are gamers, I think they tend to be comic people first, especially as creators, versus you guys coming from a much more like gaming was your gateway. And so I think you're thinking of these things that I've not seen.
I think it's becoming a little bit more cool, I guess, to like do the tabletop comic mix. I've seen Scott Harris
Yes.
King had a lot of covers in his last issue where they were like old school D&D manuals.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
Ryan Kroboth and John Eddingfield are coming out with Worston Mayhem in a few weeks, and
Right. Yes.
they have like a really cool like D&D manual. And Caleb Palmquist, I think he's doing a lot of
Oh yeah.
tabletop stuff as well. So I'm excited to see more comic writers and stuff dip into kind of like both realms.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. All right, and that's pick a power and then be a character. I think oh no, wait, we got a couple. Be a character. Need help visualizing yourself in the ICA? Look no further. Get drawn into the comic as a background character working in the ICA. Plus, get all the stuff in the ICA Veteran Agent tier. And whoop, don't go down. Let's do the other column. There we go. And then we've got another $500 tier. Start your mission. Get all the rewards from the ICA Veteran Agent tier. Plus, it's time for your third case. You and a group of up to 3 friends will get a personal virtual tabletop game run by Attic Door Media's resident GM and resident guest on the Wine and Comics Pairing Show, Mark Romero. You and your friends will take on another case as agents of the International Chimeran Administration. Yeah, this is all stuff. This is great. This is worth it. This is fantastic. All right, and that is the tippity top tier. All right, guys, and then yes, Ryan Best, meet the creators. We've got Ryan, colorist, Javi. If I'm pronouncing any of this right, just forgive me if I'm not.
I've never heard it. I think it's Javi Lapara.
It is Javi.
I don't know.
Javi Lapara. And Haley Rose Leon, who is our letterer, and Claire Napier, depending on if she goes all French with it or not. And she is our editor. And Mark, of course, and Mary, of course, and Brian, and Sippin, of course. And there's VJ and Friday, who are the writers of the case files. All right. Yeah. And we've unlocked some of the digital comics bundle. We've got, we just spoke of Ryan Kobroth, and here is his Sunmaker already unlocked. And we are working our way To
I think
actually
we're
you're
behind on that graphic. Actually,
yeah, I was
we're
gonna
just
say I
half.
think you're past halfway, just, but you've done it. So we've unlocked Epic. I can see that just barely. So that is the Epic comic. I don't remember the creators on that, but I'm aware of it. So that's a very cool comic.
Epic
With
is Tyler James.
Tyler James, thank you.
Yeah.
And then Ember and No Spell coming up. That's a longer title, right? It's No Spell something something. I just can't read
It's
it.
No Spells Last Forever.
No Spells Last Forever. There you go. All right, beautiful. And that's all coming up. All right. And then more backer milestone unlocks. Spotify play. You know what? I love the Spotify play. When creators do like a playlist for their comic or an issue or anything like that, it's kind of cheesy, but it gets me every time. I'm always like, yeah, I'm in. I have done it as an add-on. Like some creators have actually made you spend money to get it, where it's like, we'll do a Spotify add-on list, but it's my curated Spotify add-on list for this, comic. And I'm like, I'm just curious to see what that is. So yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. Beautiful. All right. So that is any last things you need us to that we haven't mentioned or haven't covered that you want people to know about this campaign?
I feel like we've mentioned basically everything.
Yeah. All right. So we will get that off the screen. All right. So guys, we are at the point where now I'm going to talk about the wine that I've paired with Incident Report. We've talked through the comic. We've looked at the campaign. And there's only one of me today. Normally Dallas is here to sort of like be a second wine pairing, but we're only going to get kind of sort of one. As me and Mark were talking backstage before coming live here, and I always do more than one, even though it's just me. And there is more than one that I'm going to talk about here tonight. So we're going to get right into it, though. So for me, this comic is, we've talked a little bit about my thoughts on it, but I'm going to go a little more into detail here. Like this comic checked a lot of boxes for what I personally love in storytelling in general, genre storytelling in general, where as much as I can love a really grandiose, godlike saga and whatnot, the best sagas out there, and even if you're going back to something like Bryan Sanderson with, his series, whether it's Mistborn or I'm gonna forget the name of his giant one that he's doing right now. I know
Stormlight Archives probably is the one you're
Stormlight
thinking.
Archive. Wanted to say Storm Chaser, and I'm like, that is not correct. Stormlight Archives. In all of those, like, yes, it's big, it's grandiose, but the scenes are much more, character driven, dialed in, which is something that I think books do rather commonly comparatively, but comics tend to get a little lost with. Like it takes so much to draw a page of art. It takes so much to get a single issue out there that we wind up not taking the time with it very often, and we're like, get to the main beats. So when I stumble upon a comic that is really just like, this is what I'm interested in doing, I want these scenes, and I want these scenes that are going to like take some time, really lay some groundwork, really just dial into these characters and what they're talking about and what is happening right here right now. The big events will happen here and there. Some of them even happen off screen. Like issue number 1 basically kind of opens with a major event. We don't get to see what it is. We do kind of get to see it in issue number 2, spoiler alert, but we don't get to see it in issue number 1. It's just talked about, kind of incessantly talked about, but it's like it has that like Shakespearean quality almost, where it's like everything's off stage. This is a live stage play, so we're not going to show you the war that's happening. We're just going to talk about the battles when we're on stage and whatnot. And that is something that that has always like rung my bell for whatever reason, like all my life, where it's just sort of, I know there's sort of a show don't tell rule in storytelling, but I feel like that's the one thing that can break that rule in a good way, where it's like you can, because you're talking about, you're not just relating information. Like when we don't get to see that moment in issue number 1, no one who's talking knows what happened exactly. It's kind of a mystery. It's sort of like all we know is the result of what happened. So we're going to talk about that and what that means to us personally, and what we're going to do about it. But it's a little bit of a mystery as to like what the event itself was. And I think that's where, like, again, that's how you can kind of get away with it, is it's not just exposition. You're not doing it to just, yeah, go ahead.
I think it harkens to like Star Wars because before they
Ah,
expanded the universe, but my first thought is like Obi-Wan, like I fought with your father in the clone with your father in
right,
the Clone Wars, and like they never
right.
explored that at all.
No, no, it's like dropping all these things, and Lucas, according to him, if you want to trust it, from that very first movie, he had all of this written out somewhere, kind of a thing, which is always one of those things everyone's got to believe how much they want to believe that. But he certainly had the ideas. Like, there was a lot of world building. We know he's a world building nut to some degree, so it's like probably he had. I don't know how detailed it was, but he definitely had it mapped out in certain ways. But yeah, very similar. It's like all these mentions. I think Lucas never, one of my frustrations with Lucas as a writer is he rarely would go as deep into, like, he'd mention it and then it was mentioned and whoosh, moved on. Like it would be dropped and then moved on. And I'm like, can we explore? Like, we don't have to know the details, but like explore what it means a little bit, a little bit more. And I feel like that's where you've sort of upped that ante with what you're doing in this comic.
Yeah, I think for Lucas, it's also one of my frustrations because I've always felt like especially like episode 2, episode 3, I feel like they need the
Mhm.
ancillary material to really get the full like
Yes.
effect of everything. And
Right.
that's sad in some ways,
Yeah.
but at least it
Right.
gives the ancillary material a good reason to exist. I really love Clone Wars and stuff, you know.
Right, there you go. Yeah, yeah. I agree. I think the one of the things about the prequels especially was we were getting a lot of detail and a lot of new characters and information, but it all seemed to be the not important details
Yeah.
and information where it's sort of like again, he went to town on the world building, but it's like, my man, we need them to take more time with the drama that's actually happening right
Yeah.
here and like explore that a little bit more and how it's affecting them so we get that arc, we get that movement of the character and buy it when that huge turn has to happen later down the line versus we have Mary chiming in. Ditto. I love Star Wars with my whole heart, but I love all those additional sources and stories. Yes. Well, and I think it opened, and to some degree, like to Lucas's credit, or to give him a little bit of a pass on that. When you have a trilogy like the OG trilogy, and everyone's, when you don't show certain things for decades, everyone's imaginations are better than anything you can put on the page at that point, right?
Oh,
It's like you're
absolutely.
almost set up for failure because our imaginations see it as like these ultimate mythological moments where it's just like this is where everything in this universe turned on a dime and these were the most crucial critical things. And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to tell that story, and it's like, should you? You might want to not do that story because now our imaginations are always going to make it better than anything that most writers could do. Now I say that, and I'm going to get back to Incident Report because again, I think you're doing a lot with the script and with the world building here, and then with how you're executing, rolling out these characters, rolling out what they do, rolling out how they interact with each other in ways that are complex, nuanced, and for me, it really felt like when I read your guys' backstory, one, the tabletop history that you had and where you were coming from with that, the idea that you wanted to tell comic stories. And I haven't read any other Addict or Media comics. I know a few more have been released. I need to get on that because if this is indicative of what the rest is going to be, I'm very, very interested. But when I then read that like you wanted to tell stories you weren't seeing or stories in the style that you weren't seeing, and this is the kind of thing where it's like, I mean, these stories, a story like this that is nuanced and complex, like, I mean, some small group of people are getting some of these stories out there, but yeah, it's not the majority, it's not the mainstream. This is not, especially if you're on a monthly title and you're pumping this out every 30 days or something like that, like that's just not the formula. It's like people just, very few creators can stick that landing with that type of schedule. But then even the independent stuff, I think comics gets a little too. Um, it's a very visual medium. The art is hugely important. Obviously, the art can be the biggest draw sometimes. Most of the time, probably even. It's what gets people in. Then the story is
Yeah.
what makes them stay. But I feel like that does a disservice to what the storytelling in comics can really do. And I really enjoy what you guys have done here. So I picked a wine that needed to match. And I did pick something. I'm like, when I was first reading it, when I read issue number 1, I usually try and start to be like, this could go with some whites and possibly some rosés or something like that, like something lighter but has some good complexity in there, some mineral quality, something sharp, something where it's like there's some seriousness to it, but it's also, it is a very gentle read in its way, because like you really just let the reader in. A lot of it is domestic scenes of just characters interacting and at home. And there's a superpowered element. But as you mentioned about Star Trek, like there's this very like hopeful, bright, it's not all doom and gloom. It's not about how scary all these powers are. It's about just dealing with them. And there are ways to deal with them. So it has that very practical approach to it. So I'm like, maybe something lighter. In the end, by the time I got to issue 2, I was begging for a red. I was like, no, no, no. This needs a red. It needs something weightier because it is ultimately as hopeful and as light-hearted as certain elements of it are. There's a lot of weighty themes. There's a lot of weighty things happening. There is some tragedy in the first 2 issues that the characters are dealing with. There are some darker backstories that are hinted at. And just with everything that was going on in this world, I'm like, all right, I need something. I need a red, but I need a red that is going to have a balance to all its complexity. Like it can't be a red where things are just popping out and slapping me in the face. Like it's got to have some harmony in that glass. So something that is going to be, sorry if you can hear the siren. I live in a city. But I think I needed a red that was going to have a certain level of complexity that was going to match everything that was going on in this comic, but that sung in harmony. And so what I wound up settling on, it is a Spanish wine. I'm going to hold this up here and let me make my thing a little bit bigger for just a moment. So this is the La Cueva de la Culpa. It is a Monastrell and Garnacha from Spain. And this bad boy is Monastrell is also known as Mourvedre. It's actually a French grape predominantly, but it's only used really as a small blending grape in France. It's a part of a Rhone-style red blend. So if you get a Côte de Rhone, it's always a little piece of what's in a Côte de Rhone. But it never shines much on its own. And in this case, Monastrell is the name that Spanish-speaking countries give it. So you can find some Monastrell in Argentina. You can find a Monastrell in Spain. And Monastrell in Spain, this is a 70% Monastrell and 30% Garnacha. And Garnacha is their word for Grenache, which is another French grape. So 2 French grapes that made their way over there. But during a period in history where, the countries weren't really even if they were talking to each other, they weren't getting along exactly. So there was, they each came up with their own names for shit, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't care what you call it. We have our own things." And so then history goes down the road. Now we're all connected and we're all trying to do the same thing. But too bad, wine is complex and everyone calls the same shit different things. So Monastrell and Garnacha, if you can find, like I said, if you want to find an Argentinian wine that has a lot of Monastrell in it, you can do that. This is a Spanish wine. And this is a fairly affordable wine. This is even just a product of Spain, so not even from a specific region in Spain. It's one of those like larger country wines where it's like they're picking grapes from all over the country. So this is an under $10 wine, but it's absolutely fantastic. The Monastrell, Mourvedre / Monastrell is the kind of grape where it's got intensity. It's dark. It's got that Napa Cab kind of weight and heft. You've got some like roasted red meat flavors in there. You've got some blackberry, black plum, some licorice and tobacco. But it's all done. It's also Monastrell and Mourvedre. One of the reasons it's not that popular in France, and they never do that much with it outside of little bits and pieces of blending with it, is an impeccably middle of the road balanced red. Nothing pops. Like everything's very, very in harmony. On first blush, that usually makes a lot of people think it's unimpressive because it's like your first sip, you're sipping it and you're like, it's nice. And so you're like, yeah, that's nice. But the more you sit and sip it, the more you can just keep drinking it. And it just goes and goes. And the more you start noticing what's happening in your mouth, your taste buds will start picking apart all the many layers, the florals that are going on with it, the differences between the sort of herbaceous meat, like roasted meat elements with those more like plummy, fruity flavors, along with that sort of like tobacco. And it's also got a certain acidity that Cab Sauv, like a Napa Cab, will not have. The real darker Petite Sirah, for anyone who knows wine out there, Petite Sirah, Petit Verdot, like they don't have that acidity, but Monastrell does. It's got this beautiful balance of everything that the more you sip it, the more you appreciate it. And then you go try to drink something that does have a pop, that thing that would impress you on first glance. And it's like, it's too much. You suddenly, if you drink this, you can maybe the next day, like once your palate resets, but you can't in the same sitting move on to something else that's going to, that just has that standout, like, look at me, taste me. And you're sort of like, that's okay. I'm not in the mood for that anymore. So this is, I think, a Monastrell. And then that little bit of Garnacha has a little extra acidity because Garnacha is a higher acidity grape. So the 30% blend of that, I think, does give this just that touch of a little extra elevated acidity that even it made it go better with this comic even than just a Monastrell by itself. So if you can find a blend, a Monastrell predominant and Garnacha blend, this is a bottle I got at Trader Joe's. So it should be, and it's probably, if you look this up, I will put it below this video when it's a recording. I'll put the name of this. You can Google it to see if there's any place, like probably Total Wine has it, or Total Beverage, like whatever might be nearby, Bevmo, whatever big chain might be nearby. This is probably a wine that has a big enough production that you can find it throughout the country. But I think this is my number one choice as a backup. You can do an Argentinian Malbec, and it's going to have a lot of similar properties to this, because the Argentinian Malbec also, it's got the density, it's got the heft, it's got those, black fruits, roasted meat, and herbaceous notes. It doesn't have quite as much of the balance as a Monastrell is going to have, but a Malbec is still it's going to be close. It's got a little more pop in terms of that weight and that intensity, which is why I think the Monastrell is the better choice for this comic, because this comic sings, man. Like all the little elements in it, it was something that it was kind of a challenge for me to find a wine quite that balanced, and decide what I was going to go with, because it's usually easier to pair something because of a pop of something. Like, what is this comic giving that's really standing out, and what is this wine giving that's really standing out, and that's an easier match. And this thing, I was just like, it sings in a way that I'm like, I'm gonna have to. Poor me, I had to drink through a couple things to really like find what this was going to be. But that, I think, was my number one top choice.
Wow. Thank you, by the way, for all the compliments.
Yes.
I'm glad you enjoyed the book.
I did, and I can't recommend this enough to everyone watching. Kudos to Mary. I'm sure she's still in the chat. If you're listening, kudos to you for your contributions to this as well. So, Mark, we ask every guest to, of course, bring on something they want to shout out and give a little spotlight to, a comic, and then a beverage pairing of their choice. So, what have you got for us?
Okay, I've got a couple of things. Which one should I do first? Should I do the shout out first, or should I do the wine pair first?
Do the shout out first.
Shout out. I actually picked a wine for this shout out as well. So I'll have two wine pairings. This is a Monster Mechanica.
Oh yeah.
It is a Renaissance comic book that takes place in Italy with Leonardo da Vinci, and I thought it's an interesting comic because it has like a wood golem in it, basically, that has like an artificial intelligence. I'm a really big fan of like alternative history stuff,
Right.
and this is alternative history. And the wine that I picked to go with this was I I didn't bring it to my table, but it is called a Porto. Okay. It was found at the end of the Renaissance era, so I thought it was appropriate to the time period of the book.
Oh yeah.
And the book is just a lot of fun. It's got a very strong female lead in it. Obviously, Leonardo da Vinci is the secondary lead, and it's got a lot of like intrigue with like the Catholic Church and a lot of backstabbing. Right. And it's just a fun comic. And they do also have a lot of like good like character moments and like a lot of exposition, kind of like building this sort of like world of like secret societies and things like that. And I feel like the story that they're going to be telling, or that I think the issue it ended, unfortunately, before the run was finished, but I really liked the kind of like uh, they were doing kind of like AI, a story about an AI basically before
Right.
AI started getting really big, and I think
Right.
that's still kind of interesting, even if they didn't get to fully flesh it out. Um,
Very cool. Is that an image book when it came out originally? Does it
it
say somewhere on that?
it is Aftershock, and it
Aftershock.
is
Okay,
written
perfect.
by Paul Allor, who is
Yes.
he does like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He's done before GI
Yes.
Joe.
I
Yeah.
love a Haunted Heart. Am I gonna remember this comic from Vault that he did, I believe? Um oh, it's about it's funny. This one's about an AI, and Haunted Heart was a heart essentially and brain that was like put into this like robotic really fascinatingly designed body, and it wound up being it is a strange kind of like love story
Mhm.
in the ultimate end, which really surprised me about it. But oh god, Haunted Heart, maybe I'm remembering that wrong.
I think you're right, actually. Haunted, and it's kind of horror, like, right? It's a
Kind of horror, yeah. I think of it as a dark romance in the ultimate end. When you read the whole thing, it really does become kind of a love story. But yeah, Hollow Heart. There we
Hollow
go.
Heart. There we go.
So yeah, Hollow Heart from Vault for that one. But yeah, Paulo Lore is really great. So fantastic. And for
Yeah.
those folks, Porto is the proper name of port. When it actually, like what it says on the bottle, if it's a proper port from Portugal, they call it Porto. And so that's what you're looking for. Likely a ruby. If these days, if you buy a port, it's always going to say ruby or tawny, and ruby is the OG. So like ruby port is what you want. Tawny's kind of a special browner port, I'm assuming.
The one that I picked was it says Sandeman Founders Ruby Port.
Ruby port, yeah.
Yeah.
Ruby is the more common one to find just because that is sort of the classic. And it's, it has the associations with like that Renaissance period, the church. It was a watered down port, is what they served at communion and whatnot. That was like the wine. So
Oh, I
everyone
didn't know
got
that.
used to drinking port. That was the wine for the long, 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 long time. Um, all right, cool. And then you had something else for us.
Yes. So I believe the other thing is the wine for incident report, right?
Yes.
Um, I went for the meta choice because I don't know much about wines. But I think we actually ended up in a somewhat similar space because I also went with a red blend.
Uh-huh.
It is a blend of Malbec, Sauvignon, and Verdot. And I primarily picked it because it's named the Arsonist. I thought that was
Beautiful.
appropriate. And the blend of three wines is kind of how the story got started in the first place. So,
Uh, that's right. That's right. And that is for like Malbec. Obviously, that was like the runner-up that I already mentioned there. Cab Sauv and Petit Verdot is one of those nice meaty ones, kind of like the Mourvedre that I also mentioned while rambling about Monastrell Mourvedre. So all of those wines, yeah, that sounds like a winner. Arsonist. That sound usually when a wine has a name like that, that makes it much easier to find. So do a quick Google search of that. We'll also put that down below the video once it's a recording. And yeah, Mary just commented that I just learned so much about wine. Oh my God. Yeah, welcome. Welcome. Um, all right, beautiful. And all right, guys, I think any last words for us, Mark, before we sign off for the day?
uh, no, I don't think so.
What's
Thank you.
next? What's next after this incident report number 3? Do you know what the next plan is for Atomic Door, or is that still kind of we're going to see what the next campaign is going to be?
The next one we're probably going to be doing is you had alluded it to. We have another series called Mythfall that's going to be
Yes.
moving into issue 2. That'll be probably the next thing that we release on
Cool.
Kickstarter.
Fantastic. Oh, and actually, that is one more question about this Kickstarter. Are the other Atomic Door Media comics, are they available as add-ons in
Yes,
this
they
one?
they
Yes.
are
Okay.
available. You can get any ADM comics as an add-on. Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, guys. Well, you heard it here. Let me drop the link to that Kickstarter one last time in the chat for anyone who is still interested and not already a backer. And if you're not already a backer, at least go check out that campaign page. Trust me, this is a comic that even if it has elements that you've heard about before that you're like, yeah, I've read superhero comics, I'm not that interested. this is really not superpowers. Yes, superheroes. No, like that's not what this comic is. And so I would draw that fine distinction. I would give it that line where there's so much more going on here. So definitely check that out. And I think that wraps us up for another Wine and Comics pairing show. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, everyone in the chat, for joining us tonight. And we will catch you next time. Our next show will be Thursday night. So look for that to drop soon on the socials, and we will check you then. Good night for now.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.